So I have never played The Last of Us, the first one. I kind of skipped over it because it did not look like a game that interested me. But with the second one coming out, I thought I would give it a chance and see what all basically the hype was about. I've only played the game once, and I'm planning on playing the second one and getting a fuller picture of the series overall. However, I thought I'd make a short video on the first one just to give like a record of my thoughts, untainted by playing the second game. And also, I've just been really wanting to put out a video, and my other videos are so much more time intensive with all the research that goes into them. The videos like the one on the Gamer's Dilemma. So my second video on the Gamer's Dilemma is still going to come out soon, but it's been taking quite some time. So first, a recap of the game. For most of the game, you play as this grizzled older man whose name is Joel, and he lost his daughter at the beginning of the apocalypse to a soldier who was trying to shoot all the infected before they left the city and could spread everywhere. 20 years later, after the apocalypse starts, he's basically a mercenary for hire, bandit, all of the above. And he does jobs with his partner Tess. They get a job to deliver a package to this guerrilla organization called the Fireflies, who are fighting against the martial law and trying to bring the world back to normal. And you find out that the package is actually this little girl, which is not very fun for Joel because it reminds him of his daughter who is dead. So in the beginning of the journey to deliver the little girl Ellie to the Fireflies, Joel and Tess find out that she actually was bitten and was infected, but she is actually immune, and that's why she's being delivered to the Fireflies, because they feel like they can make a vaccine from her immunity. Along the way to deliver her to the Fireflies, they run into a bunch of different problems. Tess dies by getting infected. They meet up with some other people and they die from getting infected. And a year goes by and they finally do reach the Fireflies. But when you reach the Fireflies, they find out that the only way to make the vaccine is to kill Ellie. Ellie was knocked out before this, so she doesn't know this, but Joel knows this and he gets upset. He doesn't want her to die. So he goes on to basically go on a rampage and save Ellie and take her away from the Fireflies. One of the Fireflies, her name is Marlene. She was actually the one who conscripted you for the job to take Ellie to the Fireflies. She says that this is what Ellie would have wanted, because Ellie really cares about people, and she gets really sad whenever people get infected and are dying from it. And she would definitely have been willing to sacrifice herself for that. But Joel doesn't want to give Ellie that choice, and he shoots Marlene and shows how selfish and kind of despicable human being he is. And then after this, when Ellie wakes up, she asks him why they aren't with the Fireflies, and he says they found them, but there's a bunch of other people who are immune, so they didn't really need you to go there. This is the very end of the game. Ellie asks him, is it all true what you said about the Fireflies? And of course it's not, it's all lies. And Joel says, he swears that he was telling the truth, and then the game ends. There are two sort of ethical themes that I see in The Last of Us. The first one has to do with corrupting youth, desensitizing them to violence. And you can see this in how Ellie, in the beginning of the game, she is kind of freaking out the violence that Joel is dealing out.
Oh man. Oh fuck. Jeez.
How he's killing people and the ways in which he's killing people. You can hear her say things like, oh shit, Joel, and what are you doing? Like, basically her just lots of exclamations about how crazy and messed up the violence that he's perpetuating is. And you can see this begin to change after a pivotal scene where Ellie saves Joel's life by shooting a bandit person in the head. She says afterwards that she feels sick, and immediately after that, she doesn't really have time to process it. She is given another gun and is kind of forced to help Joel kill a bunch of other people too. And afterwards, she's just like looking for his approval. It's like, did I do a good job killing all these people? And then after that moment, she becomes way more of a help to you in killing people. She will actually shoot people, stab people like for you, and you can hear the language that she's using change from, oh crap, like what is this, like oh shit, you're killing all these people too.
Piece of shit.
And she's really just gets mad and is just upset at the people like she's killing. She kind of like starts to dominate them and enjoy it in some ways. There's a scene where she is, right after killing all those people, she will say it's like crazy, like all these people had like families and these were actual people basically, and Joel tells her it's just best not to think about it. And she doesn't really for the rest of the game. Basically just killing is normalized for her. It becomes like a game. The second like major ethical theme I see has to do with what's the right thing to do in a survival situation like the apocalypse. What do you owe to other people? There's two kind of major ethical systems that are in play. You can see the first one really in how Joel deals with all the shitty stuff he does. It's ethical egoism, and basically it is just saying that the best thing, the right thing to do is to do whatever is in your personal interest. The consequences of your actions need to lead to the best possible outcome for you, your well-being, and you can kind of ignore the interests of other people. And you see this in how Joel refuses in the beginning of the game to listen to his daughter and pull off on the side of the road to help some people, because all that matters to him is his interests, and his interests involve keeping his daughter alive. And even up to the very end of the game, he doesn't change. He, instead of thinking about the interests of everybody else in this post-apocalyptic world and getting them a vaccine to save so many more people, he decides to save Ellie for his own personal interests because he started to care for her. And it doesn't really matter those other people. All that matters is him surviving and the things that he cares about surviving. The other view is a more utilitarian kind of ethical system. You can see this in the ethics of the Fireflies, and even in Ellie herself, where she is willing to do whatever it takes to get to the Fireflies and help people. At the end of the game, she talks about how when she got bit, her best friend got bit as well, but her best friend turned and she didn't. She kind of feels like guilty for that survival, and she wants to make sure that doesn't happen to anybody else. In a lot of ways, it doesn't matter what happens to her. What matters is what is best for everyone in the world. And you can see this in the Fireflies, how they will kill a little girl if it will save thousands and thousands of other little girls and kids. And what's best is what's best for everybody, not just for the interests of individuals. Even though these two opposing ethical systems come to a head at the end of the game between Ellie and Joel, you can see the change in Ellie and how she is starting to be converted to Joel's ethical system of survival of yourself over everything else, in how she thinks about the situation when she meets David. David is a leader of another group. You could call him a bandit group or just like a survival group. She meets up with him after killing a deer and him wanting the deer so he can take it back to his group because they're having a hard time and need food. After you, as Ellie, save David and you fight with David against infected who are attacking, he sits down and talks to you about how a few weeks back he had sent out a group of people to gather food in a nearby town and how only a few of them came back. They were slaughtered, in his words, by a crazy man who was accompanied by a little girl. This scene is meant to make the player feel bad, in my opinion, for how many people you're killing. And For Joel, that's not an issue because all that matters is his own survival. And even David kind of agrees with that by saying that we're all just trying to survive. But Ellie also agrees in this situation. She says she has no choice. And you can see how that kind of ethical egoist morality is taking root in her. That she used to really feel something for the people who Joel was killing, and now she sees that as unavoidable. Instead of possibly thinking maybe there was another way, she is already to a point where she can't see how there would be another way to survive, apart from just only worrying about your own interests. You can see how this is related to the corrupting the youth ethical theme as well, as in Joel's probably not the best ethics are being absorbed by Ellie here. Apart from the seeming bias towards Joel's ethical egoism and his individualistic and selfish morality, when it comes to his and Ellie's interactions with strangers, where it always seems to end badly for them, be it them being betrayed, attacked, or not really able to be kept safe in a group, it really seems like the story is pushing back on trusting people in a post-apocalyptic world. But apart from all that, I did really enjoy the story. But a game is more than just its story. It's also the interactive elements, the parts that you actually are controlling. And this is where I found most of my issues with The Last of Us. So the gameplay of The Last of Us consists of 3 elements: stealth, puzzles, and firefights. The puzzles are, I would say, pretty trivial. There's times where you pick up a ladder, bring it over to a spot, you have to find the ladder, or you have to grab a piece of wood that's floating in the water and bring it over for Ellie to jump on, and then that's how you move forward. But they're very simplistic. They're definitely not a main part of the gameplay. It's more of like a side thing. The 2 main parts are the stealth and the firefights. I'm gonna start with the stealth, which is probably my biggest problem with the gameplay. It just doesn't offer that much complexity. It mostly just consists of trying to hide behind things as you distract the non-infected humans and then distract the infected by throwing bottles or shooting arrows or throwing bricks. The arrows you can kill people with and that will not alert other people around. They're like the only kind of stealth weapon in the game. You can do like a stealth takedown from behind by choking out someone or using a shiv on them, but in doing so, most of the time you alert other infected or other non-infected to your presence. And since these stealth takedowns are killing them anyways, there isn't a real point in doing that over just shooting them. It's way easier. There's only one stealth upgrade in the game, and all it does is enable you to use Joel and Ellie's sense of hearing to see through walls at further distances, which is not necessarily very helpful when you can't really move, because you move and the zombies or the people see you like right away. It's not about detecting where they're at, it's about trying to distract them and hide yourself. That's the issue I had with the stealth. So it kind of forces you into using the 3rd main gameplay mechanic, which is the firefights and the actual fighting, which you can tell they put a whole lot more work into. There's so many different weapons in the game and so many different little mechanics with the fighting. There is mechanics where certain enemies can only be killed when you craft certain tools, like a club with a knife on the end or a shiv. Some of the infected you need to shiv, and so the game kind of pushes you into being as violent as possible with the infected humans and the non-infected humans. Anyways, pushing people into the firefights for me is problematic because of the game's story. And this is where you can see a disconnect between the story elements and the interactive elements, because the story is a critique of violence in this post-apocalyptic world, a critique of violence that Ellie is forced to see and go through, and a critique of violence that Joel is perpetuating, and it shows the effects on him and Ellie. But then forcing the player into all of this violence seems to kind of nullify that point the story is trying to make. And it kind of saddened me that with all that went into this story, all of the complexity of the characters and the arcs of the characters, and you finding out about like their interests, their belief systems, the game itself boils down to a basic shoot 'em up. And it felt like such a missed opportunity to not try to be more experimental with the gameplay and not just creating a violence simulator in your critique of violence. I do understand that this game was working under the limitations of trying to appeal to a wider audience of gamers who are accustomed to very violent games and combat being the main focus of games like this. And it probably would not have sold as many copies or been as big of a hit as it was if it didn't appeal to people like that. What I want to do too is give some of my own ideas on how the gameplay could have been changed to make it a little bit more enjoyable and more thematic with the story. One big change I think they could have made was making the situations between your playable character and the humans you come across more complicated, in the sense where you're not always going to know what the outcome is going to be. And what I mean by that is David, as I said before, told Ellie that his guys were just going out to get food and they got slaughtered by this crazy man. My issue with that part is the gameplay does not give you any sort of chance for a non-combative encounter with other human beings. They will shoot you on sight. You can sneak by them, but that is not easy. As I just mentioned before, the stealth is not a fun element of the game. What they could have done instead was make it a random chance whether interacting with other humans would end up with them shooting first. So you could risk it for a sizable benefit to try to talk to the people instead of fighting them. I think that would have given a more realistic feeling to this post-apocalyptic environment where the humans, you're going to have to, in some ways, try to trust these people. Like, you're going to have to risk that a little bit in order to gain a benefit of not having combat, or maybe these people will team up with you or aid you. Because as it is, walking up to a guy, you just get shot. Like, there's no benefit to trying to talk to people. And that just seems like a very, very big missed opportunity that would have allowed for these combat situations to unfold as well, but also give people an option to try to avoid them, but also give them a benefit for avoiding them. This doesn't fix all the problems completely, because you still have that aspect of the game that is still very violent, but it gives the violence a little bit more nuance and makes you feel bad, possibly. The other route you could go, and this would be the way more experimental and probably the one that most people would probably have a problem with who enjoy like combat situations, is where you, instead of playing the perspective of Joel, just play Ellie's perspective and have her not taking part in Joel's violence. Like, you play as her trying to avoid taking part in the violence and basically hide and try to survive as Joel is killing all these people. I think that would have really worked in the story's benefit, because you could be experiencing Ellie's desensitization to violence without having to contribute to yourself. And I think that would have kind of hammered home that critique of violence more than just being Joel and dealing out all the death that he does. I think that like these differences that could have been made would have made the ethical themes of the game more cohesive. You would have the story and the gameplay working together for your message against violence, instead of having the story be a critique of violence, but the game itself ending up being, in a way, just a love letter to violence. But I don't know. Maybe Naughty Dog just loves murder. Even though I had some pretty big issues with this game, I still really did enjoy it, especially in times whenever it let itself breathe and just focused on, I think, its strength, which is creating a very, very real world and great atmosphere. My hopes for this second game is definitely to lean in on that, back off the violence a little bit, especially if they're going to keep up with the critique of violence, and in some ways I think be a game that makes Joel the bad guy and shows that violence is not the right way, and that has Ellie take a different path. From what I've been hearing, which I haven't really heard much about the game, that's not going to be the case, but they might still surprise me.